She's dreaming, the rabbit said. AKA, I said, because I voiced the bunny.
Hi, I'm Sarah, and I've worked in the Make Cartoon Look Nice business for over 5 years. Back in March 2024, I joined Glitch to be their lead compositor or technical artist. Now let's take a look at how I transformed this into this for the Knights of Guinevere teaser. In the opening shot, I built a relatively simple node tree. This is where I house all of the layers for each composition.
Once it was ready to go, I used a process called color isolation.
When you separate each color, it allows you to apply effects just to that color specifically. We have to do a little bit of a workaround and make sure that each color used is within our character's palette. Now, you don't want to do any sort of color changes within the palette itself, since you may eventually lose the ability to revert it back to the original swatch. Instead, any sort of color correction, changes, or effects should just be used on the isolated color setup that you made within your node tree.
Now that her basic compositing was set up, I experimented with some final touch-ups to help sell the straight-to-DVD movie look.
Ultimately, we went with this version due to the balance of showcasing colored lines and looking like Cinderella 2 DVD box art.
But there was something missing. It needed a little push to add some more color and life into it, while also providing some digital artifacting crust. Let me introduce you to my friend Chromatic Aberration.
To make this, I isolated out the red, blue, and green color channels and offset them just enough to add an edge to the lines.
Now that I had the keyframe ready to go, I applied the rest of the treatment and some shinies to the animation. Now we have an excellently eepy princess.
I think she's gonna wake up soon.
In the idea or thumbnailing stage, there were a few variations of creature colors that we were looking at. I was lucky enough to do color design on all the critters here with the help of our art director. This shot was definitely a doozy. On top of individually lighting each of the Bambi wannabes, they also needed shadows proportionate to where they were standing. I tackled this by hand drawing some shadows on them and under them. That way, I had the most amount of control over each of them
Instead of relying on procedural lighting.
In this case, I used Harmony's highlight node to procedurally generate rim light using the silhouettes of the animals as a matte. This is one of the most, if not the most, standard way that rim lighting is done on 2D animation outside of drawing it by hand. But it's kinda cool to see how you can combine it with other effects to make it look more unique. But let's take a closer look at her dress. Using the color isolation method from shot 1, I was able to take her dress, add a highlight to it, push it further with a gradient, and give it some overall dimension. But no princess is complete without some sparkles. So using the dress as a matte, I drew some glitter and plopped it on.
Now let's add a little bit of pixie dust here. A little bit of marketable plushie there.
A little bit of duplicating the shot, placing it on top, adding a Gaussian blur, setting it to light and blend mode, and ooh, how soothing.
What a lovely dream she's having.
Or maybe she's having a nightmare?
Like the last shot, I had the privilege to color design the characters using the art director's color key as a guide. I can only show you this one though, for now. It was a fun challenge to work with such a limited palette. However, when I add lighting on top of it, it changed the final look. But that's just compositing, baby. When the file was passed to me, there was a good amount of compositing already done by our animation lead, but there was still a lot to do. My job was mostly fine-tuning and color correction.
The contrast between pure red and blue somehow works in a horrific, harmonious way. This works out perfectly since their hex codes and RGB values are mirrored. Since blue and red go against each other, I pushed the blue in some areas of the darker spaces, and it made the bright reds even brighter redder.
Yay, color theory.
What's extra special about this shot is the larger use of hand-drawn lighting. If feasible, it adds so much more form and drama and clarity to the animation that procedural lighting just can't hit.
This shot is a great example of the use of dynamic colors and values. As we see in the grayscale version, you can still tell what's going on. It has a good amount of midtones with no pure black or white. However, back to the color, the use of pure hue cheats your eye into thinking that the bright parts really are that bright.
Having strong values to tell a story and bring your eye to where it's supposed to go is one of the biggest foundations you can keep in mind when compositing a final shot. Plus, when looking at it in black and white, it could make it look extra creepy.
But, this one isn't black and white.
And it's still really creepy. Ooh.
Okay, unlike last shot where there was a ton of character movement, this shot has a lot of camera movement, sort of. When looking at the top-down and perspective view of the camera, we can see how I set up the different distances for each layer. You can see that the spacing of my layers isn't even.
Having layers at different places within 3D space helps give depth to your shot.
When you build a scene in 3D space, your virtual camera will take into account the spatial difference between each 2D plate, just like a real multiplane camera would. Now that the camera was locked in, it was time to get to color.
Diving into this shot was so much fun. I went a little feral with the glow since the original color thumbnails were quite creepy. In a good way. When it was refined to a color key, the lighting was taken in a more head-on approach. However, we wanted to push her eyes to make it look like an animal caught in a camera flash. So adding in these oogly-googly eye glows was my favorite part. I really don't want to see that shit at nighttime though.
The woman's default skin is gray, which makes it a perfect canvas to add any color to reflect the environment around her. The use of green on her skin not only portrays a copious amount of bounce light from all over the forest, but it also adds a sense of unease. Or she's gonna barf. Last little bit for this. Let's look at the streaks of light on the left. Within the background file, there's a couple of rainbow prism layers and some beams coming down. Using an animated matte, I was able to add some shimmer. I drew some long rectangles, matted it to the light ray layer, and used a peg transformation to scoot it across. I also did the same for the opening shot and shot 2, but they aren't as dramatic. Maybe the light woke her up this time?
Is she still dreaming? When are you gonna wake up? People are waiting. Hello? When are you waking up?
There's this running gag of,
Oh, we're just gonna fix it in post.
but no one seems to know what that means. Unfortunately, this alludes to compositing being an invisible task. I'm grateful that I have the opportunity to make our work visible. I think it's pretty neat. There's so many tips and tricks that I couldn't dive into this time, but it means the world to me that you rubbed your eyeballs on this video anyway.
Your support helps me make post-production's invisible work visible. Make sure to watch Knights of Guinevere when it comes out, hopefully this year. Here are other places that you can find me outside of YouTube, and here's my lizard.